The trembling in my daughter Sarah's hands was the first thing I noticed that morning, while my mother kept repeating those same haunting words. I need to find Michael. Where is Michael? She must have said it 20 times that day already, each time with the same urgency, the same desperation, as if speaking it for the very first time. Before we continue with this incredible story, hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable true stories that will leave you speechless. Eleanor Thompson, 73 years old, had been known her entire life as the perfect mother and wife. As her daughter, I'd always believed my mother was strong, determined, and honest, a woman without secrets. That was until the Alzheimer's diagnosis came. At first, it was just small things. She'd misplace her keys, forget her grocery list, sometimes mix up my name. But these last 6 months had been entirely different. That particular morning, my mother sat at the kitchen table, staring at an old photo album in her hands. There was an indescribable sadness on her face that I'd never seen before. When I sat down beside her, she turned to me and asked with startling clarity, "Do you know Michael? My Michael?" I'd never heard of anyone named Michael in our lives. My father's name was George, and he'd passed from a heart attack 5 years ago. I had no siblings. I was an only child. None of our relatives were named Michael either. Assuming this was part of her confused mental state, I gently shook my head. But the look in my mother's eyes told me something different. This wasn't a delusion. This was a real memory. Perhaps a secret buried deep for decades. Her hands trembled as she pointed to an empty page in the album. "His picture was here," she whispered. "I hid it. Nobody could know." But what she said next would change everything. Sarah approached us, her face etched with concern, as my 15-year-old daughter, watching her grandmother's condition deteriorate, was taking its toll on her too. "Mom, is Grandma talking about that person again?" she asked quietly. I nodded, but this time something felt different. I decided to speak with my mother's doctor again. Dr. Patterson had explained that Alzheimer's patients sometimes recalled very old memories, especially those with heavy emotional weight. Maybe Michael was real after all. That night, after my mother had fallen asleep, I began searching through old belongings in our house. The attic held boxes that hadn't been opened in years. I'd moved everything up there after my father's death, unable to face going through his things. Now I felt like a detective, searching for a missing piece of my mother's past. I found it in the third box, a faded hospital document with worn edges. The date read March 15th, 1968. My mother would have been 20 years old then, not yet married to my father. At the top of the document were the words "Adoption File." My hands shook as I turned the page. Baby name Michael James. Mother Eleanor Rose Mitchell. Mitchell was my mother's maiden name. The document contained no information about the adoptive family, just an official seal confirming the procedure was complete. A heavy weight settled in my chest. My mother had been carrying this secret for 55 years, and now, as her memory failed her, this secret was fighting to surface. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The next morning at breakfast, my mother asked the same question, but with a different tone. "Haven't you found Michael yet? I need to tell him something. I need to apologize." Sarah and I exchanged glances, neither of us knowing what to do. My mother, in the final chapter of her life, was searching for the son she'd given up 55 years ago. Perhaps she wanted to say goodbye, to apologize. But how could we find him? And even if we did, would it be the right thing to do? I spoke with Dr. Patterson again. He explained that Alzheimer's patients sometimes needed to make peace with their past, that it could bring them comfort. But he also warned me, finding someone after 55 years isn't easy, and they might not even know about this situation. I had to make a decision. My mother's condition worsened with each passing day. Some days, she didn't even recognize me, but she asked about Michael every single day, searched for him constantly. It was as if her brain, while forgetting everything else, clung desperately to this one memory, this one regret. I hired a private investigator. Tom Bradley was a retired cop who specialized in finding people. When I showed him the adoption papers, he scratched his gray beard thoughtfully. 1968 adoption records are sealed pretty tight, he said, but there are ways. DNA databases, ancestry websites. People are finding long-lost relatives all the time now. While Tom worked on his search, my mother's moments of clarity became fewer, but whenever they came, they were always about Michael. One afternoon, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength and said, "I was so young. They said I couldn't keep him. My parents, they said it would ruin my future, but I loved him. I held him for just 1 hour." Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks as she continued. Brown hair, just like mine. The tiniest fingers. He grabbed my thumb and wouldn't let go, but I had to let him go. I had to sign those papers. Sarah overheard this and came to sit with us. "Grandma," she said softly, "you did what you thought was best." My mother looked at her granddaughter with sudden recognition. "Sarah, sweet Sarah, you have his eyes. Michael had those same green eyes. Just wait until you hear what happened next." 3 weeks later, Tom Bradley called me. "I found him," he said simply. "Michael James Patterson. He lives in Portland, Oregon. He's a retired teacher, married, 2 kids. He knows he was adopted." My heart raced. Does he know about my mother? No. His adoptive parents told him his birth mother was young and unable to care for him. They passed away years ago. But here's the thing. He's been searching too. He registered on 3 different adoption reunion sites. I stared at the phone number Tom had given me. How do you make a call like that? How do you tell someone their birth mother is dying and wants to see them after 55 years? That evening, I watched my mother sitting by the window, looking out at the garden. She was having one of her good moments. "Mom," I said gently, "what would you say to Michael if you could see him?" She turned to me, her eyes clear for just a moment. "I'd tell him I never forgot. Not one single day. I'd tell him I celebrated his birthday every March 15th, alone, with a cupcake and a candle. I'd tell him I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep him." I made the call that night. Michael's voice was warm, but cautious when he answered. I explained who I was, and there was a long silence. Then he said, "I've been waiting for this call my whole life." He drove down from Portland the very next day. When I opened the door, I gasped. The resemblance to my mother was unmistakable. The same nose, the same gentle eyes, even the way he tilted his head slightly when listening. Is she okay?" he asked. "She has good moments and bad moments," I explained. "Today has been more bad than good. She might not recognize you. She might think you're someone else." He nodded. "I understand. I just, I need to see her." We walked into the living room where my mother sat in her favorite chair. She looked up at us, confusion in her eyes at first. Then something shifted. She stared at Michael, studying his face. "Michael?" she whispered. He knelt beside her chair, taking her frail hands in his. "Yes, Mom, it's Michael." The word Mom broke something inside her. Years of buried emotion came flooding out. "My baby," she sobbed. "My baby, you came back." "I'm here," he said, his own voice breaking. "I'm here, and I'm okay. You don't need to worry anymore." But what my mother revealed next left everyone speechless. She reached up and touched his face, tracing his features with trembling fingers. "You have your grandfather's chin," she said. "And my eyes. I can see my eyes." For the next hour, She was more lucid than she'd been in months. She told him about the day he was born, about the hours she held him, about the 55 birthdays she'd celebrated for him in secret. Michael told her about his life, his loving adoptive parents, his career as a teacher, his own children. "You became a teacher," she said with wonder. "I was a teacher too before I had you." "I know," he said. "Somehow I always felt drawn to teaching. Maybe it was in my genes." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Are you happy? Did you have a good life?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I had wonderful parents who loved me, but I always wondered about you. I always felt like there was a piece missing." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have been stronger. I should have fought harder." Michael shook his head. "You were 20 years old. You did what you had to do. And look, we found each other. It just took a little longer than most." Over the next few weeks, Michael visited every day. Sometimes my mother knew who he was. Sometimes she didn't. But even on her confused days, she seemed calmer when he was there. He would sit with her, holding her hand, talking about his students, his family, anything and everything. Sarah grew close to her new uncle quickly. "It's weird," she told me one day. "He's family, but he's also a stranger. But it feels right, having him here." One morning, my mother was particularly clear-minded. Michael was there, as always, sitting beside her bed. She looked at him, and then at me. "I need to tell you both something," she said. We leaned in closer. "Your father knew," she said to me. "George knew about Michael. I told him before we got married. He said it didn't matter, that everyone had a past. But I think he would have helped me find Michael if I'd asked. I was just too ashamed." She turned to Michael. "Your birth father was a boy named Daniel. He was killed in Vietnam 3 months after you were born. He never knew about you. I couldn't tell him. His parents were so destroyed by his death. I thought telling them about you would make it worse." This revelation changed everything we thought we knew. Michael squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Everything turned out how it was supposed to." My mother's condition deteriorated rapidly after that, but there was a peacefulness to her now. The agitation was gone, replaced by a quiet acceptance. Michael was there for all of it, the good days and the bad ones. During one of her last lucid moments, she told us about the day she gave him up. "The nurse tried to take you right away," she said to Michael, "but I begged for just 1 hour. 1 hour to memorize your face, your smell, the weight of you in my arms. They thought I was being difficult, but I knew it had to last me a lifetime." Michael was crying now, and so was I. Sarah held my hand tightly. "I wrote you letters," my mother continued. "Every birthday, every Christmas. I never sent them, but I wrote them. They're in a box in the attic, tied with a blue ribbon. I wanted you to know you were loved, even if you never knew by whom." We found the letters later, hundreds of them, each one beginning with "My dear Michael" and ending with "Love always, your mother." They chronicled her life, her marriage, my birth, every major event, as if she was keeping him updated on the family he should have been part of. One evening, as the sun set through her bedroom window, she looked at both of us with perfect clarity. "My 2 children," she said, "together at last." She passed away that night, peacefully in her sleep. Michael and I sat with her until the end, holding her hands, telling her we loved her. At her funeral, Michael gave the eulogy. He talked about the power of love that transcends time and separation. He talked about forgiveness and acceptance. He talked about the mother he'd known for only a few weeks, but who had loved him for 55 years. "She gave me up so I could have a better life," he said. "And I did have a good life. But finding her, even at the end, made it complete." After the service, as we stood by her grave, Michael pulled out a small cupcake with a single candle. March 15th isn't for 3 more months, he said, but I thought we should do this together, just once. Sarah lit the candle, and we sang happy birthday. Not for Michael, but for the moment my mother had waited 55 years to see her family complete at last. But there was one more surprise waiting for us. A week after the funeral, Michael called me. "I've been going through the letters," he said. "There's something you should see." He came over with a particular letter, dated on my 5th birthday. In it, my mother had written, "Today is Emily's birthday, and all I can think about is you." She asked me if she had any brothers or sisters. I told her no, but my heart broke a little. "You would have been such a wonderful big brother to her. I see you in her sometimes, the way she tilts her head when she's thinking, the way she laughs. It's like parts of you found their way to her anyway." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Michael said, "I want to show you something." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of his daughter. "This is my Emma. She's a doctor now." I gasped. Emma looked exactly like Sarah did at that age. The same green eyes, the same smile, even the same way of tucking her hair behind her ear. "Genetics are funny things," Michael said. "We were apart for 55 years, but look, our children could be sisters." Sarah came home from school then, and I introduced her properly to her cousin Emma via video call. Watching them talk, seeing how immediately they connected, I realized my mother had been right all along. Family finds its way back together, even if it takes decades. Michael and I started a new tradition. Every March 15th, we meet at my mother's grave with our families. We bring cupcakes, one for each year they were apart, though now we've switched to just bringing one large cake because 55 cupcakes is a lot. We tell stories about her, the ones from when I knew her and the ones from the letters she wrote to Michael. Sarah is working on a project for her history class about adoption in the 1960s. She interviewed Michael about his experience and has been researching the societal pressures that forced young women like my grandmother to give up their babies. "It's not just Grandma's story," she told me. "There were thousands of women just like her." She's right. Of course, my mother's secret wasn't unique, but her love was. It survived 55 years of silence, decades of shame and regret. It survived even as her mind crumbled. In the end, when everything else had faded away, our memories of my father, of me, of her own name sometimes, Michael, remained. Dr. Patterson later told me this isn't uncommon with Alzheimer's patients. The emotional memories, especially those tied to deep love or deep regret, they're often the last to go, he explained. Your mother's brain might have forgotten the details of her life, but it never forgot the love. Michael keeps all the letters in a special box now. Sometimes he reads them to his grandchildren, telling them about the grandmother they never met, but who loved their grandfather before he was even hers to love. He tells them about sacrifice and difficult choices, about how love doesn't always look like what we expect. One day, Sarah asked me if I was angry that my mother kept such a huge secret. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I finally said. "I'm grateful." "Grateful?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, grateful that she trusted her failing mind more than her healthy one. Grateful that when all the walls came down, what remained was love. Grateful that Michael came back. Grateful that I got to see my mother find peace. But most of all, I'm grateful for that moment when my mother looked at both of us, her 2 children, and smiled. For 55 years, she had lived with a piece of her heart missing. In those final weeks, she was whole again. The disease that stole her memories also gave her the courage to reclaim the one memory that mattered most. In her confusion, she was actually the clearest she'd ever been. All the social expectations, the shame, the fear, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was Michael. Sometimes, I walk past the living room and still see her there, in her favorite chair, looking out the window. Where's Michael? I can almost hear her ask, and now I can answer. He's here, Mom. He's part of our family. He never really left. The photo album where she pointed to the empty space now holds a picture, Michael as a baby, the only photo she had kept hidden in her jewelry box. Next to it is a photo from that last week. Michael and my mother, his hand holding hers, both of them smiling. 55 years collapsed into a single moment of grace. When people ask me about my mother's story, I tell them it's not just about secrets or Alzheimer's. It's about the persistence of love. It's about how the heart remembers what the mind forgets. It's about second chances that come just in time. Michael often says that he gained and lost a mother in the span of 3 weeks. But I remind him that he was never lost to her. For 55 years, in every cupcake with a candle, in every letter never sent, in every March 15th that came and went, he was there. He was loved. And in the end, that's all any of us really need to know, that we were loved, completely and unconditionally, even when we didn't know it, even when we couldn't feel it, even when 55 years and a failing mind stood between us. Love finds a way. It always does.